This is WFYI News Now. It's October 24th, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, a new nonprofit that aims to promote health and wellness in Indy's near north side, where Indiana's U.S. Senate candidates stand on the future of Social Security. And advocates say even with federal protections, Hoosiers with disabilities can still encounter a variety of barriers when they cast their ballot.
If for some reason there is a problem, I think voters ought to remember that there are entities out there to help them enforce their rights.
Those stories coming up. But first, a Columbus musician is scheduled to be sentenced on Friday for his role in the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. John Schaefer was recognized in photos as the lead member of the heavy metal band Iced Earth. Schaefer is also identified as an Oath Keeper, a far-right militia organization. The 56-year-old was the first person to plead guilty to the breach on January 6th, turning himself in 11 days later. The U.S. Attorney's Office is recommending Schaefer receive 3 years of probation, pay $2,000 in restitution, and perform 120 hours of community service. Addressing the long-term future of Social Security is one of the key challenges facing federal lawmakers. A government report earlier this year projected the Social Security Trust Fund will run out by November of 2033. As Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith reports, Indiana's U.S. Senate candidates have very different views on what changes are needed.
Republican Jim Banks says preventing a Social Security crisis will require raising the retirement age and means testing benefits for recipients, but only for future generations.
And I think you can do that without affecting anyone who relies on Social Security today or who will tomorrow.
Democrat Valerie McRae points to the cap on Social Security taxes. Next year, only the first $176,000 people earn will be taxed.
If we took that cap off, and the more money you make, the more money you give into Social Security, it would make it viable.
Libertarian Andrew Horning says he's the only candidate who will address the country's larger debt problem because, in his view, most government spending is unconstitutional. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
A new nonprofit called Indy Health District Inc. launched this week. Its goal is to promote health and wellness of communities on the near north side of Indianapolis, where people experience health disparities and unequal access to opportunity. The nonprofit is funded by Indiana organizations, including IU Health, the Children's Museum, and Ivy Tech Community College. Part of its effort is the establishment of the geographic boundaries of a 1,500-acre health district. The area encompasses the Crown Hill neighborhood, Highland vicinity, historic Flanner House homes, Meridian Highland, and Ransom Place. The district aims to increase economic opportunities, access to health care, housing, and food through its multi-million-dollar funding. It also aims to make these neighborhoods more walkable. That's according to the organization's press release. The nonprofit's leaders say community input will continue to be a cornerstone of their operations. They say they will also put out a public-facing dashboard on their website to track the impact of their funding. And for our final story today, with about 2 weeks before Election Day, many Hoosiers are creating their voting plans. As Indiana Public Broadcasting's Abigail Ruman reports, advocates say even with federal protections, Hoosiers with disabilities can still encounter a variety of barriers when they cast their ballot.
Voting accommodations are required by federal law. For example, the Americans with Disabilities Act requires polling locations to meet accessibility standards, and the Help America Vote Act requires an electronic voting machine at every polling location. Emily Munson is the policy director for Indiana Disability Rights.
If for some reason there is a problem, I think voters ought to remember that there are entities out there to help them enforce their rights.
Voters can reach out to the Indiana Disability Rights or Secretary of State's office. Munson says voters can also file a grievance at a polling location. She says that route may not lead to a solution in a timely manner, so she encourages voters to do what they can to cast a ballot and follow up on the issue. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Abigail Ruman.
That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by Drew Daudelin, with support from the news team at WFYI and public media journalists across the state. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. Kendall Antron produced our music, and I'm your host, Abriana Herron. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.